This week, I am away. I am in Boston at the second annual Stargardt Summit, and this is being held in Newton, Massachusetts. I am the closing keynote speaker. Why am I sharing that with you? Because there's no live podcast this week, but instead, I am taking the excerpt. I've taken the video from the Succeed Without Sight Summit, which I am the co-founder of the Thriving Blind Academy. Anyway, and I am taking the first speaker, Dr. Lee Warren, his session, and I am putting it in for you to view. Some of you, I believe, were even at the summit and got to see him. I just watched it again. It is so powerful. It's so good. His presentation on the mind, on thinking, on choices, on all the things that we do on the Blindsided podcast. Also, he did such a great job in his presentation. Well, he is a brain surgeon, but he talks about us doing brain surgery on our own through changing our thinking and pathways and actions and behaviors and emotion. Oh, this is a great presentation. So please buckle up, check it out, and let us know in the comments and things. Did you like it? And we'll see you next Saturday live. Thank you.
And that is, what does running a 4-minute mile and brain surgery have to do with each other? What does running a 4-minute mile and brain surgery have to do with one another? And you might say, well, nothing. What in the world would brain surgery have to do with running a 4-minute mile? But I'm going to tell you in just a few minutes that they actually have everything to do with each other, because doing impossible things requires a person to be what I call a self-brain surgeon. Now, the story starts on May 5th, 1954. Before May the 5th, 1954, people believed that running a mile in under 4 minutes was physically impossible. In fact, the experts of the day, the doctors like me, said that you might even die if you tried to run a mile in under 4 minutes. It was impossible. But Roger Bannister watched a different mental movie. He was watching a different story play out in his life. So what I want to tell you is that Roger Bannister was a person who had to learn how to do self-brain surgery before he could run a 4-minute mile. To be clear, Roger Bannister was not the fastest runner of his age. He had rivals. He did not win all of his races. In fact, he lost probably more than he won in his career. But he believed that he could run a 4-minute mile. Now, in order for us to understand what had to happen for Roger Bannister to run a mile in under 4 minutes, you need to understand how brains work, even your brain. And what I'm going to tell you now is how brains work. Your brain is structurally changed by every thought that you think in your life. That's why I call it self-brain surgery. When I go and do surgery in the operating room, I physically change the structure of someone's brain for the purpose of changing something about their life to help them become healthier and feel better and be happier, maybe even not die. And so when I say self-brain surgery, what I'm telling you is when you choose to think one thought and not another thought, you are choosing to structurally change your brain in a way that will change your body and your life and your reality. That's the truth about why I call it self-brain surgery. Well, before Roger Bannister could run a 4-minute mile, he had to decide that it was possible for him to run a 4-minute mile. And this is modern neuroscience in action. We have the fact that on May the 6th, 1954, Roger Bannister ran a mile in 3 minutes, 59 seconds, 59.4 seconds. And it wasn't even a perfect day for Roger Bannister to be running. He was running on a cold, windy day. It was raining that day. And he actually accomplished the first 4-minute mile in human history. And that's not even the most interesting part of the story. I'm going to tell you in a few minutes the most interesting part of the story. But today, we're going to focus on one thing. And that's what the difference is between your mind and your brain. So I want to just take a second here and explain the difference between mind and brain and why it matters that you understand that they're not the same thing. And the reason it matters is this. how you think about your ability to change things in your life it will determine your ability to change things in your life. Let me say that again. How you think about your ability to change will determine your ability to change anything in your life. That's the truth. I don't have time to prove it to you neuroscientifically or structurally today, but that's what I write about in my letter and talk about on my podcast all the time. It's what I write books about, about the fact that how you think about your ability to change will determine your ability to change. Now, all of us have a mental movie that we're playing all the time. There's a quote from a physicist named Erwin Schrödinger, and he said, the task is not so much to see what nobody else has ever seen, but to learn how to think differently about, think what nobody else has ever thought about what everybody else can see. Now, this is important even if you can't see with your eyes. And here's why it's important. It's important because the fact is that the mental movie that you're playing in your brain all the time, the soundtrack that you're hearing in your mind all the time, comes from the automatic thoughts and feelings that are generated by our brains. And what neuroscience has proven to us now is that 80% of the thoughts that you think are automatically negative and always false. About 80% of what you think about in your mind, when you hear that little voice that sounds like you, about 80% of it is not true. And so the fact is, even people who can't see with their eyes are always seeing a picture and a movie of their life in their minds. And so how you choose to look at that movie, how you choose to tell your mind to project a different movie onto your brain will determine what turns out to be possible for you. And so I want to share with you today that the biggest hindrance to personal transformation, and this is important if you're a caregiver, a loved one, a parent who like Kristen, who has children who have a disability of blindness, or if you are struggling with vision loss yourself or any other kind of human limitation or challenge, this is the biggest hindrance that I'm about to share with you. The biggest hindrance to personal transformation in your life is believing 3 common lies. And I want to share those 3 common lies with you now. And the extent to which you believe those lies, one or all of them, will determine your ability to transform your life. So the first big lie that people believe is that I am just my brain. We've adopted this idea in our society. Science has kind of made us think that however you inherited your brain, what your brain is made up of, the way that your brain behaves is how you have to be. That this is just my personality. This is how I am. This is the cards I was dealt. I'm stuck with this. And I'm just here to tell you that's a lie. For the last 300 years of Western thought, we've believed that neurons and genes determine how people's lives play out. And now we know, with no doubt, that what you think about has more structural impact on what your brain turns out to be capable of than your genetics and your upbringing do. That's just the truth. The second lie is that I am how I am because of how my brain works. And now we know you can change your personality, you can change your habits, you can change your potential, you can change your capabilities by changing what you think about. So it's a lie that I am how I am because of my brain. And the last lie that we commonly believe is that I am how I am because of some trauma or some past problem or some family issue or some aspect of my physical capability like blindness. That this is how I am and this is how my life has to be because I am X, Y, or Z, because I have this, because that happened to me. We believe commonly that that's true, and it turns out not to be true. This is really important for spouses and parents and anybody who's caring for somebody with any type of limitation, is that we really have to believe that what I'm about to share with you is true. I want you to say this with me out loud, if you will. Just say it to yourself, okay? I am not just my brain. I'm not just my brain. I am not just my blindness, but I am rather my response to everything that happens to me. The bad news is you can't change some of the things about your physical body or your life. You can't necessarily change that you're blind. You can't necessarily change if you were born disadvantaged or with some kind of other struggle. But you can change how you respond to those things. And that will be what changes your life. I'm not just my brain. I'm not just my blindness, but my response to everything that happens. This is the thread. The most important thing I'm going to share with you today. This is the thread that if you start tugging on it, my friend, you'll begin to unravel those three lies, and you will open your mind to the possibility of radical transformation of your life. This is the stuff from which somebody like Roger Bannister is made. This is how we get people like Daniel Kish, the blind gentleman who developed that echolocation technique so he can actually ride a bicycle without crashing. This is how we get Eric Weinermeyer, who climbs Mount Everest. This is how we get Scotty Smiley, my friend from the Army, who I operated on in Iraq after a bomb took both of his eyes, and is the person who introduced me to Kristen Smedley. And he went on, after being blind, to be the first officer allowed to serve on active duty in the United States Army. He ran an Ironman triathlon. He climbed Mount Rainier, and he started a successful company and had 3 sons after he was blind. This is the stuff. Understanding that I'm not just my brain is the stuff from which people like those folks are made. This is where you get the idea that blindness or anything else cannot define you, but sometimes it might actually have the power and the potential to refine you if you can learn a way to redefine it for yourself and redefine it for yourself in your own life. So these people didn't let blindness define them. They became self-brain surgeons, and they changed their life because they redefined the problem that they had as an opportunity to be more developed in some other way. You're not just your brain, you are your response to what happens. And that turns out to be very good news. So here's another thing I want you to say with me. I am not just my trauma, my blindness, my experience, my circumstance, my genetics, my parents, my upbringing. I'm not just those things. I am who I choose to become. The bottom line is that nothing that has or will happen in your life, and no physical problem or disability, has the inherent power to change or define your life unless you allow it to. You get to decide what you do with the cards that you're dealt. You get to decide what you do tomorrow, even if yesterday it was limiting to you. You get to decide that. That's just the bottom line. It's the truth. And that's what I came here to tell you today. I came here to tell you that self-brain surgery is not a metaphor. It's not a self-help trick. It's not some kind of positivity bias training. It is the mechanism of how you can command those structural changes that every thought you think make in your brain. Every time you think a thought, you create new neural pathways in your brain that will either recreate the problems that you've had and recreate the habits that you've been living through your life, or they will start to change them. Every thought you think becomes an opportunity to perform surgery on your own brain. It's the process of directing your mind to take charge of your brain in a way that helps you and doesn't hurt you. So remember when I told you that Roger Bannister running the 4-minute mile wasn't the most interesting part of the story? Now I want to tell you what is the most interesting part of the story. From the 1600s, it's been documented in all kinds of writings that people were getting close to being able to run a mile in 4 minutes from all the way back to the 1600s, but they thought it was impossible. Over and over, people wrote, nobody will ever be able to run a mile in less than 4 minutes. But Roger Bannister did it in 1954. And here's the most interesting part of the story. 45 days later, another runner from Australia ran a 4-minute mile, and he ran it a second and a half faster than Roger Bannister did. And within 10 years, 50 other people had run a 4-minute mile. And now here, 70 years later, 1,700 people have run a mile in under 4 minutes, almost 1,800 now. So what's interesting about that to me, besides the fact that lots of people can run 4-minute miles, is that those people decided that I can't change my life until I change my mind. It wasn't the training. It wasn't their physiology. It wasn't that the 4-minute mile was ever impossible for a human to run a 4-minute mile. Nobody came along and gave them better shoes or changed the technology that they had available to them or put them in a better school than they had been able to attend before. What was different was that Roger Bannister showed them that it's possible for a human to run a mile in under 4 minutes. And if it's possible for him, then it's possible for somebody else. That's the only thing that changed. In 400, 500 years, 1,000 years, nobody had been able to do that. And all of a sudden, 2 people did it in 45 days. And then within a few years, thousands of people have now done it. Here's the shift that you have to make. It's this statement that I want you to say. I can't change my life until I change my mind. Kristen said it was okay to share this. I can't change my life until I change my mind, and I can start today. That's my motto. But the reason that's my motto comes from a verse in the Bible in Philippians 4, chapter 13, that's verse 13 that says, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. So the idea is we always discount when we hear somebody say that something's possible. Most of us automatically, and I already told you that 80% of your thoughts are automatically negative and untrue. Most of us say, yeah, maybe you can do that. Maybe Kristen can do that. Maybe Roger Bannister can do that, but I can't do that. We always discount it because I've been through this, or this happened to me, or I can't do that thing because of my body or because something about my life. We always give ourselves a discount. And I just want to challenge you that if you will believe that your brain is under the command of your mind and that you can actually change things by changing the quality of your thinking, there's really no limit to what your life can become. I have to say this. Not every single thing is possible for every individual, but what is possible for every individual will remain impossible for them until they change their mind, until they decide to command that structural change. So one more time, just for the fun of it, let's say it together. I can't change my life until I change my mind, and I can start today. That's the news that I came here to share with you today. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Kristen.
I absolutely love it. And you know what, Lee? I love that you add, and I can start today. That's what today is all about. It's starting today, not tomorrow. Not going to decide to be a thriver tomorrow. And I took so many notes while you were talking. I'm gonna move Charlie and I back up here. Let me get. I know Charlie wants to chime in on that. Charlie is all about the response. When you said response, I saw everything about him light up. Here he comes. Because Charlie we built this academy on things of the ECC from the K to 12 school system, but also success principles. And Jack Canfield has it as the E plus R equals O. That I know Charlie was like lighting up when you said the word response.
Oh, yes. I was lighting up. I'm going, woohoo. I love to hear this message over and over. Another thing in the Bible that woke me up was where there is no vision, people perish.
That's right.
And that was me. I was blind to any success, any possibility, any ability, and I blamed it on my legal blindness. I blamed it on I only had a high school diploma. I blamed it on it's too hard being me. Life is just too difficult. So I shut off my vision. I didn't believe that. I had no idea what neuroplasticity was, and then finally. I wish I heard somebody like you, but I had enough. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I started opening my mind's eye to what could be possible. And then I started learning from people like you that, hey, keep thinking it. You'll build the pathway.
You became a self-brain surgeon.
Yes.
I want to break this down real quick to make it extremely practical. When you listen to the stuff that Lee just talked about, and I was taking notes, I'm not my situation, I'm my response. If it's possible, the thing that got me when I started meeting role models I wanted to know the people that were thriving, not the people that were struggling. I needed to know what they knew. And the way that this gets real practical is when Michael was in kindergarten, I mean, he was doing so great. They didn't even they thought I was lying about his blindness in preschool. He was doing so well. It was me that changed my mind. But it was when the school district said 70% was all they expected him to achieve. And they said that is what was possible. And that was going to be tremendous. Wow. So that's what I want parents to hear is when I then said, but wait a minute, 100% success, to expect that and have him achieve that, I believe it's possible because I know of other people that did it. And they said they believed it was impossible. And I said, well, then let's just try it. The worst we can be is wrong. And sure enough, Michael did achieve very well. But he had to be that first one showing that it's possible. And that's what this whole academy is about, bringing people together to say, yeah, I was able to do it and you can too. And so many folks sit there and say, that's great for you, Kristen. That's great for you, Charlie. I can't do that. That's not possible for me. And what we all just heard you so eloquently say, Lee, is it doesn't matter if you're in a rural school district. It doesn't matter if the teachers don't get it. It doesn't matter if the college doesn't have an office for disabilities. That's right. It really is our response.
That's right. There's a writer named Anne Lamott, and she writes all kinds of books. But one thing she said that always stuck with me is she said, there's nothing outside of you that can make any kind of lasting change inside of you unless you need a donor organ. And so what she's saying is if you need a kidney, you got to get that from somebody else. But everything else that's really got the power to change your life happens inside of you. Like nobody out there. You have to have an internal locus of control, the psychologists call it. You got to decide that what's going to be true about my life will have to start inside my head. Nobody can do that for me. I've got to do it inside myself.
Fantastic.
I love that. And you know, Kristen and I, in a lot of our sessions, and we think, and then we choose. I love how you brought it to. You're making that choice. That pissed me off when I learned that. No, I'm not. Well, the autonomic nervous system and different things in my body were always prompting me to what's not possible. I don't believe it. I'm a loser. And I had to wake up to that. And I love it because I think, then I choose, then I behave. Then after I behave, I have an experience. That experience leads me into an emotion, which if I'm awake to this, I can then move into better thinking and start creating new pathways to success. But it does not happen overnight, does it?
Does not. It takes a lot of practice. I mean, the bad part is that the structural changes that your brain makes happen, they recreate themselves until you tell them to change that pattern. So you basically have to constantly reinforce new brain habits until they finally break through and become ingrained, because it's so easy to slip back into the way you used to think. And so you have to diligently and willfully, persistently pursue this change that you want to make. And if you don't, you're going to just recreate the way it's always been and prove to yourself that that negative voice was true. But the negative voice is never true. What's true is that you can change anything about your life. You can't change your eye color or your hair color naturally, but you can change just about everything else in your life by changing what you think about.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. See that?
And we always bring that, Kristen, in. We always talk about the event or the stimulus in our life. You cannot blame the way you behaved, thought, or what you did from that. I mean, you can, but it isn't working. But what you can do is take a moment, step back, breathe, and think, how can I respond so I can move towards a different outcome, a better outcome that's moving me in that direction? And I loved how you talked about Robert Bannister. I love that. It's like it opened the door to what's possible for people that thought, I could never run a 4-minute mile, but if Roger can, maybe I could. It's kind of like the brothers. And Kristen and I, we talk a lot about belief. If you believe it's possible and you believe you can, you will start wiring those new connections on a daily basis.
That's right.